Shifters. Welcome back to another episode of the Post Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Shawn Soole. I'm specifically wearing this hoodie, which I usually do wear one of many hoodies that I have. Specifically to talk to the gentleman today, Alexandre Gabriel from Maison Ferrand. I'm going to recall two really great stories before I bring him in. He's sitting in the green room right now. The very first cognac house I ever went to when I came to cognac in 2010 was actually Maison Ferrand, and we were able to taste. It was during distilling season, and we were able to taste distillation straight off the stills, and it was an amazing time. I got to that trip and the BNIC trip in 2010. I've talked about this with a lot of people. The most insane characters from the industry were on that trip, and I was this 29-year-old kid who happened to fall into this incredible trip that I was in. And then the second story is actually when I was in cognac last, and that was when I got my certification as an educator, and I spent an hour and a half in a cab driving at almost midnight to the Bordeaux airport because I had to fly out first thing, and so did Alexandre the very next day. And so I've never had Alexandre on the show, and it's just an absolute pleasure to have an opportunity to have you on the show. Welcome, sir.
Well, it's a pleasure. It's a great pleasure, Shawn, to be here, and welcome back to Cognac. Really, in essence, this is where I am right now.
Yeah, I've got to get back. I was trying to get back this year around this time, but it just didn't pan out the way I wanted to. But I'd love to get back to cognac and do another big all the houses as much as possible and see that. So for everybody who's listening for the first time, I'm a big comic book introduction story. Like, how did you get the start in the spirits industry that led to Maison Ferrand?
Oh wow, that's a long story, but let me give you the short version. I grew up on a small farm in Burgundy, so multicultural, but vineyards as well, South Burgundy, making the wine for the village really, and also we had a little bit of cattle, and so very small village there. I grew up with my grandparents. And my grandfather, I just found, it's funny, a picture of me. I'm 3 years old on a tractor, and he's holding me. And this is a tractor when there's no hood, and the early tractors. So it just dates me a little bit. It's a black and white picture.
Oh, seems like we've lost him. Yeah, we might have lost him. Oh, it's all good. I think we lost you for a bit there, but I think you're back now. So you were talking about the tractor.
Yeah, so that's the way I grew up, on a small farm, South Burgundy, making wine. I've been harvesting wine by hand since kids. We used to love harvesting time when you were super young because you didn't get to go to school. You didn't go to school. Even the teacher was part of the harvesters. Then later, this is where you met your girlfriend, and stuff. It was always fun. And you imagine these late evenings, you get to taste the grape juice. It's slightly sparkly, and it's already got some alcohol. And I'm not saying at what age, but yes, we enjoyed all that grape juice. And that was great memories for me. And then, you grow up, and you're in a small village, and my grandmother, who's, again, was like a mother to me, just always where I grew up, and was said, if you stay here, you're going to end up marrying a second cousin like a lot of us. And and I don't know, it didn't seem, I guess, no great second cousins around. But more seriously, she kind of really pushed me. She was somebody very insomniac like me, who read at night and read me a lot of things. And just to me and for my grandfather, the wealth was in the land. He always said, you don't own a farm, you tend a farm. And I think it's the same with the distillery. You don't really own a distillery. You tend a distillery. Just look at the people, the pictures in the drawers, the pictures on the wall. These guys probably thought they owned it, but now they're dead, And so, and in a very humble way, you're trying to do the best and to be the best that you can be with your team, and then hand on the baton. That is for sure, what it is. My family was on a farm at least since 1610. So that's something very inspiring to me. But I wanted to see more. I was not an easy kid in high school, And so I couldn't see myself to, if it was didn't have a meaning for me, I couldn't do it. and
Mm.
and that was not easy. I don't know if it's the same for you, Shawn, but there's one guy you got to deal with all your life is yourself. And I was like, what am I going to do with this guy, and that was me. And because a lot of guys says, he's a not an easy kid and stuff. And I thought, I can do one thing. It's either my own farm or my own shop. I think I can do this. But I didn't speak English. The world was becoming more global. I did a first job as a barback in New York on a 3 months temporary student green card in South Street Seaport, New York. And it's funny, by the way, to be a little bit romantic. I met my wife 3 years later in New York, but she was working in the shop right next door, and we didn't know each other. So the crazy redhead, who's now the mother of my three children that are all grown up, was just working right next door. So I don't know if it was meant to be back then, but we met later. And I just was like, wow, there's another continent there where people that are younger, that are really willing, kind of doors are open. In the countryside, you got to make your marks 20 years. And so I thought that was kind of fascinating. And I started speaking English. And I remember doing vodka shots for the guys early in the morning. I had the worst shift, before they went trading. And one day I mustered my courage, since you're a rum fan. And I said, don't you want to try with cognac? I mustered in the best English I could. And this guy, I remember very well, man. I was, what, you couldn't drink at that age, but you could serve alcohol. And then he mustered my courage. And I said, don't you want to try it with cognac? And he's like, you don't understand, kid. I don't want anybody to smell my breath. So they were drinking, the most neutral spirits possible. So nobody knew they drank. And it's very funny that our job now, I think it's the same with you, is exactly the opposite, is drinking things for the flavors. I've just created a lot of spirits since then, including a super high, extremely high ester that is just about the flavor. And so, I started, I guess, on the wrong side. And long story short, I didn't know anything about business, about the world. So I saved as much as I could. And I finally enrolled into a business school, and I realized I was going bust. I borrowed some money, and I decided to represent, farming products. Why? Because I know farming. So, and one of our customers was a tiny little distillery in Cognac, but there was a hail billing system. There was also wine from Medoc. We had 9 different customers. And I was not spending a lot of time at school. I went to school with a suit, trying to look as old as I could. I was able to buy like this gray pinstripe with a big tie. And when I see pictures, it's kind of odd. But that's how I made it work, man. And we had 4 employees, students, try to make it work. And one of these guys one day, and I had met by the time Debbie, this wonderful redhead from New York. And, I grew up on a farm where there's always people. And the world I live in right now, we're not a company, we're really a community on a mission. And so there's always people. I live here at the Chateau de Bonbonnet, and when I push my door, it's work. And when I push the door back, it's home. My kitchen's everybody's kitchen. And that's the way I grew up. And Debbie loved people as well. And I thought she was cool. And she's still now a drummer in a band, and we love music. So we met at the James Brown concert on the Lone Star Cafe, in a little place in New York. And what I did is, one of our customer was a small distillery in Cognac that, it turns out, when I did the research later on, was around, as a vineyard in the early 1600s. So that really spoke to me. And they just kind of were basic, and they wanted to sell stocks, or it was tiny, very tiny. But we did well. I found customers in New York, and then this school had a year in Japan. So imagine, we had to work so hard. I have a back problem, so I do push-ups every day. Nobody knows this, since I'm 18. And so the room where I stayed in Japan was so small. To do my push-ups, I had to open the door. So my feet could, so the bedroom was so small. And it was in Ikebukuro. And so that's how we did it. And it helped me. I was able to pay for the business in school. And to me, wealth was in the land, remember. And at one point, one of the guy of this family says, you got to come, and I'm going to tell you something. And I said, I can't. I'm introducing this woman to my parents. And this is a big deal. And my mother is like, not enough French women. You have to go get an American one, imagine. And so I said, well, this one I really like. And so, he said, bring, and then I cannot go to Cognac. I really got to go see the parents. And he's like, bring the girlfriend. And so we're there. And he says, this business going nowhere. Do you want to join in? I was 22 years and a half, 23 years old, and I had no clue what I was doing. I knew farming. I knew winemaking. I knew my grandfather was a bouilleur de cru. A bouilleur de cru in France is somebody who has the license to distill his own estate crop. You cannot commercially distill other things that you don't grow. You have to distill what you grow. That was very defining to me, by the way. And so that's how it started. Very, very tiny, 37 years ago. And it's funny, you make me think of a story. My first experience was distilling, really being there, not professionally, but like being really demonstrated, was my grandfather. I was 10 years old, and it was distilling Mar de Bourgogne. I don't know if you ever tried Mar de Bourgogne. Mar de Bourgogne, for people who don't know what it is, it's like grappa. You distill the must, right? So when you make wine, you press the grapes, and what's left, it's still sweet, but it's really the stems, the must.
We got you out. It's gonna French
Yeah.
internet.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is Cognac internet, man. I apologize.
It's all good. But no, Marc de Bonnier is one of my favorite Marc styles and grappa styles. I think we lost him again. It's all the fun of doing live streams, Pete, folks. And
I'm right in the vineyards right here, so that's what it is. And so, this punch was 65%. So that first experience, and that's about alcohol. And imagine I'm in front of that still. That was a little still, huge, looked huge. And my grandfather says, first, and remember I had done a shot 6 months earlier because I busted a full finger. And he says, first you have to, Mar de Bourgogne, you have to taste it with your ears. And I was thinking, man, he's going to pour that stuff in my ears. You're thinking about a guy that went through Second World War, and you're a kid, and, that was very not different education. And he's like, I'm like, what's going to happen? And he said, listen. And I said, I can't hear anything. And he says, you see, when you distill Mar de Bourgogne, your raw material has to be intact and fresh. So you listen. If you hear insects buzzing, you know that it is compromised. So first, you taste with your ears. And I'll remember all my life. That was, I guess, it's only after the fact, you just realize that was defining. I had no clue. He showed me fermentation and then, the first drop and all of that, where you lick your fingers. But that, to me, that the raw material of what you distill is so important that most of what I do today, we grow most of what we distill. I'm still a farmer. We make Citadel gin, we distill. We have juniper berry fields actually right outside here. When we make Maison Ferrand, we have our own vineyards. We grow grapes, and we make recently we created a plantere cut and dry with coconuts. We grow coconuts, and we work with our neighbors who grow coconuts as well. So to me, that was how I started. And little by little, the house I'm in here right now, Chateau de Bonbonnet, I bought 4 years later. It was kind of right next door, and it was raining inside. We got an incredible deal for a reason, and I'm very handy. So the guys who've worked with me, we can do a lot of things, and we still do all the work ourselves, redoing slate roofs at night. And so when people see it, they're like, man, that's a lot. I said, no, it's 37 years, and Debbie and I always agreed. We never took dividends. We always reinvested in the team and in the mission. And so we're not very cash rich, but now we got barrels and stills. I collect pot stills. I do a lot of different stuff. But that's how, Shawn. A lot of details never gave anybody else. But how, I don't know why I just got into it. I guess you told me, came in Cognac here, and I remember. And so that's the yesteryears for me. How going really for me, it's a farm to a farm. And to my grandfather, cognac was the shining star of spirits. When he talked about cognac, it was like, okay, let me tell you about cognac. And he was distiller of, wine from the Burgundy region, which was a byproduct of wine, which is Ma. And so to me, being in part of it, I was so proud to show him when we finally got to something. And that's how we started. So really a barrel at a time, a batch at a time, and reinvesting all these years. So that's Sean, how it all happened.
So with that, like obviously cognac is a massive part of your portfolio. How did you sort of build out your portfolio and start diversifying what you were making? Where is the decision? Because like you could stay and you and I have chatted about this. Cognac is very rigid and cognac has been very, and producers have been very specific about what they. How did you sort of like go? Okay, well, we're going to branch out now. We're going to do gin. We're going to invest into Plantaray. Obviously the dry curacao and the liqueur side of things. How did you diversify in your brain to
But
keep pushing that?
think about it. You run a distillery. It's a farm. So in a farm, you make do. You should have seen the amount of trash we produced on the farm with quite a few people working there. Very little. The fruits that you peel, you give the
Hmm.
chickens that you recycle everything. I mean, when you look at the amount of trash now generated, it's just mind-boggling for me. And where I'm going to is that when you distill in cognac, and I guess a guy like me, you distill, as you know, for 5 months. You're a cognac educator, you know very well. So once you harvest, when I was a kid, we used to harvest in October. Younger now, climate is warmer, so it's more September. So when you have your wine, you do your fermentation. As you know, I do a lot of research with yeast, and then you start distilling. And you distill by law, you have to be done on the 31st of March. As you know, cognac is extremely regimented. Why? And I think it's a good law. The grapes have to be fresh. And in fact, at Maison Ferrand, we're done on the 31st of December. Why? Because we like the grapes to be even fresher because you get more intact, beautiful aromatics. So what do you do the rest of the year, Sean? You just sit there, right? And I think you gathered me. I'm a bit of an intense guy. I know that. So imagine few many years back, and you're looking at these beautiful stills, and they're sitting there, and you got your team. I call it my rock band. All the guys that create with me. I one of my hero in terms of organizing creativity is a musician called Frank Zappa. Is that you got to be the best at what you do, and you attract the best. If there's a vision, and that's Maison Ferrand. We got the best technicians around me since I'm very young. And so, what do you do? We're like, man, we're gonna make something. And when I was, young at the time, drinking age was 16 years old. And so I want to say I only started at 16. And so what we drank is a lot of shitty gin and tonics, man. When we went out to the discos, was but I still had that taste in my mind. And I love spirits of intensity. Cognac is a spirit of intensity, and gin is, but in total different repertoire. And something you may not know, Sean, when you came here in Cognac, if you really look at hilltops in Cognac, there's still reminiscent little plots of juniper fields. Why? Is because in medieval time and subsequent time, until 200 years ago, they were used as a condiment, for food, because pepper was expensive.
Mhm.
I don't know if you know, in medieval time for Europeans, cinnamon, next time you eat cinnamon, think about it, was more expensive than gold, more expensive than gold. And so, there were all berry trees on top of the hills. I had a neighbor, he passed now, Monsieur Bonnet, told me, these are magical trees because when I was a kid, there's no pine trees in Cognac. It's too warm. So we used to put our shoes, my grandfather would cut, a juniper tree. And so it's around there. And I'm like, you know what? Juniper tree, gin. I drank all this bad gin. What if we try to make a beautiful gin? And me, I started studying it, going to different distilleries. Since I'm started doing this business, I look at our knowledge as like a deck of Pokemon cards. And you go see the other kids who are distillers, they're grown-up kids, and they have a deck of Pokemon cards, and we swap. I did the math. I swapped couple Pokemon cards with 82 distillers master blenders in my life. I could name quite a few, and so all my life doing this. And so I went to do this with gin distilleries, and I was very disappointed. I saw that most of them were just some of them just using a raw spirit and putting flavors, which is part of so when you know the regulation for cognac and you look at that, you're like, you're kidding me, man. Actually, it's just a paragraph long that it only says it has to be a dominant flavor of juniper berries. You're like, man, this is crazy. And I'm like, what about using the real fruit? What about distilling in these tiny little kettles that are cognac stills? And of course, when you're young, you think the world is your oysters and everybody is going to be, wow, what a great idea. So I went to see Custom and Excise, super excited. I thought my idea was irresistible. And they looked at me all like, are you crazy? I said, what do you mean? This is a cognac still. You're not distilling gin. They're like, why not? So, well, there's no rule that says you can. And I said, well, there's no rules that says I can't. And he said, yes, but we're Custom and Excise. And I'm like, wow. And I really explained my finding. I actually have. It's funny. It's here. I'm a bit superstitious, so I keep a lot of different documents. I had archives from the oldest Genever distiller in France called Genièvrerie, Citadel in Dunkirk from 1778. And I showed these guys that thinking they're going to be like, wow, this is cool stuff. And they look at me like, what do we care? It's like they were cognac customs and excise. So it was a big flop, totally. And I didn't dare tell them that I did a batch, and they're saying this is fully forbidden. And in France, in cognac, if you cross the rule, you can go 5 months in jail. So nobody's kidding around, as you know. And so, but I was young and stupid, and I'm like trying a lot of things, or passionate, really. I mean, totally obsessed. And as I go out in the parking lot, there's a man, Michel Dewosky, comes to me. He passed now. And he said, I'm the number 2 here. I heard what you say, and you saw me very quiet. I'm a history buff. I love what you're doing. I said, really? I thought it was a trap or he was making fun of me. And it was like,
are you wearing a wire? Are you wearing a wire?
Exactly. I'm like, this is not the vibe I got, man, when I was there in the room. And he's like, no, but the number 1 guy is the authority and we abide. So he's going to be doing this for another 5 years. So you're nowhere for 5 years. But 5 years and 1 day, I should be the one in charge and you shall be making gin. And when you're very young, 5 years is like, you're kidding me?
So long.
It's so long. I mean, I was 23 or 24, 25. And it seems so long. And you know what? It was a present because I had a temporary license to do trials in a smaller still that I had in my kitchen. It was legal. And I did every trial, and I actually created a patent, one of the only patent in gin making. So thanks to these guys being really hard-nosed, actually made me better. And I don't know about you, Shawn, but when you're pissed at something, you work even harder at it. I know for me, it's one of my little engines, because like, I'll show these guys, this is going to be the best gin there is, and this guy would actually come and try it. And true to his word, when the other guy retired, he went and he said, I'm going to tell you what we do. Cognac doesn't have a spirit safe. The guy did his research.
Mm-hmm.
You need to put a spirit safe on your stills. You need to wait the end of the 31st, the 1st of April. I'm going to decommission your still and recommission it for gin. And we're going to do this every year. And so we did that and the first batch he was there, and he was so, I owe a lot to this guy because he showed me. And actually, thanks to him and the work we did, cognac stills can be used off season for any other thing, by the way, now. So it was the first time, that was done ever, but it can open another way. So that's how Citadel was born. And we made gin. And, Shawn, I kid you not, we made his first batch and we tweaked a few things and again a few things, and we thought it was delicious because we used this still that our low swam neck's got. Citadel has a lot of essential oil, so it's got body, so in drinks, it's not only the flavor, the intensity, but also doesn't bite because of the essential oils. I was trained in mise en valeur, using the other, elements to bring forward the main juniper berries. We had planted juniper berries, so you have to be in for a generation when you do this. Now they're producing, for quite a few years. But back then, and then, and so that's how Citadel was born. And I thought, man, we're gonna conquer the world, and we didn't. First it almost bankrupted us because when you think it's great, and so we sent it at the time. Gin people thought was from the UK. People didn't know it actually Dutch and northern part of France did Geneva and so on, but they thought that's what it was, and so we sent a lot of our samples to all the competition in the UK, and there was not many at the time. And I tell you, we won almost every time. And the guys were very, very elegant about it. I would have this very British accent calling me, "Oh, hello, sir, may I speak," etc. At the time, fixed phone. And and he said, "You got a delicious liquid." And it gave me a little courage, but still no sales. Still no sales. And you know who really people don't give him credit? There's a man, 1999. Citadel was born in 1996. My first kid, Ariane, was born in February, and we launched on April. And so two kids in 1 year, my daughter Ariane and Citadel, we launched in 1999 of like crossing the desert and a lot of self questioning, like, are we crazy? And there's we're selling a little bit here and there, few like a layer of a palette, few cases. There's always a crazy guy who's willing, or lady who's willing to try and loves it. And then a great uh, a great Spanish chef, Ferran Adria. I don't know if you know him. He's the guy that invented molecular cooking, cuisine. The man who had at the time El Bulli. He's a rock star in Spain, and he's on TV, and he's saying gin and tonic is a gastronomic experience. Don't use a tube as a glass. Use a wine glass. Don't use little crush ice. Use big ice cubes. Don't use a shitted gin. Use the best. And he pulls out a bottle of Citadel on TV. And then he say, use a great tonic, and I'm making my own. So, and he's making a gin and tonic, and people don't give him the credit to invent that, what people call the Spanish gin and tonic, really, with that wine glass, which now conquered the world, and it was with Citadel. And so, it was amazing. I knew, and I had a rerun because my distributor called me, and I thought he's from Barcelona. The Barcelona football team had won, and he's, no, 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 you don't understand. Ferran Adria was with Citadel. You should be so happy. And that was a nice break because it gave us confidence. Spanish market starting, really developing, then went crazy. People don't realize all started in Spain, that renaissance of fine gin. And a lot of chefs look up to him. So there was a very gastronomic approach. I remember in Belgium, and so on, different countries. And then there's a journalist from the New York Times, just a year later, caught onto it, tried it, thought it was delicious. And it was like Citadel stormed the gate. And I have another desk. I still have the article. And, just a year later. So that's how it all started. And we got into Citadel. And in retrospect, and people say I got few awards as like the godfather of artisanal gins. I was like, and they say, what was the vision? I tell you, I told them I had no vision. I was just making something we wanted to drink, and I had the pot stills. And yes, I think we know what we're doing with distilling, but they will, people only connect the dots afterward, Shawn. You got to be honest and say you're just trying stuff that you believe in, and sometimes you fail, sometimes it works. So that was Citadel. So we just really made do with this. And Citadel took on a life of its own. Now it's in 100 countries. We still have the juniper berries here. We dedicated a distillery to it because doing it on and off with season was crazy. We never produced enough, and we had to buy these tanks. It didn't make sense. So in the end, I collect stills. I have in the barn a whole bunch of old stills. So we refurbished 19th century, early 20th century still. We have our own coppersmiths on staff, Gaylor. So he still does everything with a hammer and anvil. I love the métier d'art, as we say in French, the artisanal craftsmanship. And we fixed the distillery. And you need to come back, Shawn. I'm going to show this distillery. It is my brainchild. It was stuck in my head for many years. And I've been distilling in distilleries that are hundreds of years, and suddenly you get to build your own, and we did it in an old building with, with old pot stills, but it is truly a brainchild of my team and I. So that's how we got into Citadel. And then rum, well, same thing, but different. Gin was, I wanted to make gin. Rum was like falling in love like at a place you don't know is gonna happen. It's like when I met Debbie, yeah, you're there to see James Brown, and you see this lady doing tequila shots with beer chaser, and I've never done one before, and you meet, and that's like wow, and then you like that person. Well, that was kind of similar, except that I was trying to make money by selling our secondhand cognac barrels, and because we make Grand Champagne cognac, as you know, it's the Premier Cru, and when you use the secondhand barrels, Sean, there's 3.5% of that liquid that is in the wood. So people really care, are really interested in what was in there. So we had a great little business selling our barrels, secondhand. And believe it or not so much in Scotland, was actually in Barbancourt, in the Caribbeans in Haiti. Thierry Gardet at the time was really my rum master, and at a few, I just, was like, I love your cognac. I want to buy your barrels. And I sold them barrels. We used to sell container loads. They were shipped there. And he said, why don't you come and see me? He said one day. And I'm like, sure. And I went to Haiti, and I saw rum making. I saw the cane juice. I saw what they did. I saw the fermentation, very different. And he knew I was really like, I was training to be a blender, and later a master blender, and obsessed with the techniques. And he said, you need to meet a guy. It's Laurie Barnard in St. Lucia. He's just crazy like you. And I met Laurie, and it was incredible. And then he said, you need to go to Barbados. There's this distillery. And so I go, and that stays West Indies Rum Distillery. And Sean, I remember all my life, they showed me something they show no one, is where they grow their yeast. And when I was a kid, my grandfather, who was what they call the modernist in the wine at the time, was about you use very clean equipment, like you don't you
Mm.
always said yeast is your friend, bacteria are your enemy. And I go to Barbados, and they show me a place where they grow yeast. And I was fascinated because, most wine now you buy yeast, and they're growing their yeast. And they said, this is where we grow our yeast, and this is where we grow our bacteria. And, for me, it was almost like a Pavlov reaction. It's like almost felt a state of panic. You grow bacteria? I mean, I almost crossed myself. I was like, bacteria, because we clean everything, to have these
Mhm.
impeccable flavors. Say, no, bacteria is a tool. It's a leverage of flavor. And to me, I mean, that was what, 30 years ago? To me, that was opening an unknown door. It was entering another level of flavors. How you create these super high esters. There's only really 4 or 5 distilleries who have a historical grasp on that, and that was one of them. And the fact, like Pokemon cards, that person was willing to swap some of them with me about this. And of course, Cognac has, that has incredible know-how about aging, élevage. We don't even call it aging, and blending, where we use vats, barrels of different type, where we actually, choose the proof at which we barrel to extract what you want to extract from the wood. And so these guys are like, I want these Pokemon cards. And I was like, I want the ones about yeast. And we started doing this. And I'm like, I remember telling Debbie, my wife, this is fascinating, man. I saw seeing things you don't even know. And I got to tell you, I tried to do this with cognac, see what would work, but I'm not sure I can develop fully. But it was kind of super fascinating. And I said, well, I'm selling these barrels. And I told Thierry and these guys, can we swap barrels for rum? And I started sourcing from different entities, you know, different barrels that I would bring back to cognac and age in our cognac barrels. That's how it started, Sean. And I did this little range. I mean, at first, 10 barrels, 20 barrels. And I was the buyer of a wine chain in France called Nicolas, 500 stores. And the buyer was tough as nut, but for some reason, she loved what we did. And she told me her father was a captain in the army. She grew up in Africa, etc. And so, one day she one day calls me and she said, "You're gonna have a permanent listing with us," because I had to go every year to get a new listing for the new year. I said, "Which cognac?" I said, "Not your cognac." I said, "But what? The gin?" "Actually, your rum." I said, "Well, where did you try it?" "Well, this restaurant called La Vieille Chaumière. They told me you gave them a bottle. I tried it. It's the best rum I ever tasted. I'm buying it." I said, I don't even have a brand. She's like, well, you make a brand, okay? And I'm like, okay. And that's, I grew up on a farm and, and plantation where you plant. And that's how plantation was born. I was like, out of a phone call. And as you know, we evolved the name to Plantaray later on. But that's what did I know? It was just like that. And that's how we went into it. And she bought barrels. So I bought more barrels and more barrels. And then later on, you know, um, when we had a little more money, we grew, fast forward about 12, 15 years ago, I tell my wife, I'd love to get married with a distillery. It's a marriage, Debbie. I'd love us, like the team, we get married with another, like a distillery in a rum distillery. And at the time I knew, and I know 99% of them. And, it's like getting married. It's just, how can you're going to live with this team forever. And State West Indies Rum Distillery is the one I told you about. And to be able to be part of that adventure turned out possible because they were our largest supplier, and the family who owned it was like, we don't have the juice anymore, we don't have the passion anymore. We grew in a lot of other businesses like catering, in the Caribbean, there's families who have this overarching businesses, or the Goddard Group, very nice family, and they said some people would like to buy this distillery because it's on the beach to make it a resort. We want somebody who's gonna make it beautiful the way it was. This distillery, a lot of things were born in this distillery, was established by a genius in 1893. And they tell me the story. There's a room that's something called the Distiller's Vault with archives going back to 1893 about rum making. This guy wrote everything down. So they say, we think you can do it, but we want to know your family. So for 1 year, like my kids went, my wife, everybody, we got to know each other. They wanted to make sure we're for real and committed. And that was basically 10 years ago. We finally signed. My son Charles was 17. He told me when he was 15 he wanted to do this job. I found recently Charles and I at the distillery in St. Lucia, and he's nosing rum at 12 years old. He's got braces, no drinking. He's got braces. And I did a master class in Miami. I put that picture. So he's got that big smile with a Justin Bieber haircut and his braces and nosing pot still rum. And really he was there for that negotiation. I said, you're going to remember all your life. And we spent 11 hours in the window in a meeting room with no windows. And finally, we signed and we got married with State West Indies Rum Distillery, that beautiful beach distillery that's in Barbados. And Barbados, as you know, is the country that has the oldest documentation about rum making, in 1650. The country where the prime minister very often in his speech will say Barbados, is rum and rum is Barbados. So being part of that adventure, and again, I don't think you own a distillery. I think you tend a distillery. If you go to that distillery, I'd love to show you. You open these old drawers and you got guys with a grin. And if I'm lucky, I'll end up in that drawer, with these guys, and I think would be an honor, and they were pictured, over 100 years ago. So that's the adventure, and that's how I got into this. The curacao, more quickly, the curacao is, I do a lot of research about cognac. I created 1840, going back to a cognac full of flavors, distilled on the heavy lees, aged in a dry cellar to make it a little snappy bottle at a higher proof. I had a bottle from 1840, and that was a young 8-year-old cognac. This, as you know, when this bottle doesn't age anymore, distilled in 1840. I actually had 3 bottles. I bought it in a local auction. And when I was finalizing this, I invited a friend of mine called David Wonrich, who's, as you know, a spirit historian, a dear friend, and obsessed with research on spirits and cocktails. Some of the best books, Imbibe, the Oxford Companion to Spirits, and so on. And I said, do you want to come over? I want to show you this cognac. And, we stayed away, and he says, he loved it. And he said, can I make a mint julep? And we made hundreds. And then he said, I want to make a mint julep, but the original one, that's this 1840. I said, well, what the, if you write the back label, that will be your price. And if you make 2 of them, that will be your price. And that's what we did, revisiting history from inside. And he said, I was showing him, I love citruses, and I distill a lot of them. And I showed him what I did. And he said, Alexander, we're missing a true, drier, intense, beautiful, well-balanced curacao with cognac. And I'm like, well, let me show you the other distillates. And we looked at that, and he sent me after that 50 different recipes from old books, whereas cognac is not a written down art, liquor making is. So, and I created the Pierre Ferrand, the Ferrand dry curacao. That's what we did, going back to the ressource, not the blue stuff, not the sticky stuff, using the real La Haha orange, using the vegetal infusions, all these old techniques that actually were written down. And that little bottle, and when we were done, I looked at the cost, because he said, you want the great bartenders all over the world to use a product of that quality, but be reasonable with your cost, like with the rest of what you do. You don't need to make huge margins on that. I know, because you don't with other products. Do the same. And he gives me a price, and I said, David, I can't reach that price point. This is so expensive the way we make it. So we searched for the cheapest bottle we could find, hence the square bottle, and we glued the label on the side to make it look fancy. And little did we know, was the less impact on the environment, because it's very light glass, fully recycled. And that's how the packages was born. A friend of mine is a designer. We used, I'm looking at 5 or 6 old bottles of curacao that were the inspirations right now from the 1800s. That's how dry curacao was born. So this is a bit of a tapestry, and I'm sorry to be long-winded, but
Oh
this is
no,
a
it's okay.
tapestry of how gin and then rum, and of course the curacao were born. And of course, I've distilled other spirits for learning. When Charles always wants to go to a distill with me since he's 15. So, we distill Pechuga with some friends, and stuff. And in that case, I'm a spectator. I'm just swapping Pokemon cards. And it's a way to, you don't always perform the music that you practice at home, right? It's for us to be better. It's learning from others. But I've been focusing on these spirits all my life. And I told you, you look around, it's been 37 years since the first days and first drops in God willing, I'd like to do this another 30 years.
So with that, like you do have such a massive diversification of products. Now with the world sort of changing so rapidly post pandemic, especially with people not drinking as much, low ABV being trendy, economic pressure, how do you sort of see, how do you sort of, because you from outside looking in, it always feels like you are dialed in exactly, you know exactly what you're going to do, you think it through, and then you make the decision. How do you sort of like play that now as the industry changes after 37 years?
Well, let me tell you, I don't have that clarity. I have more a sense of what we should do as a mission. And I think our mission now is very clear. And I think I was invited to speak at the American Distilling Institute as a keynote speaker. So think about hundreds of distillers out there. And I always find, when I was younger, I hated that old fart telling me how great he is and how wonderful it is. And yes, I always was rebellious. And unless it's really somebody who just tells me something that is important for me, something I can take home. You know what I mean? And to me, it's because and I said, it shouldn't be about me. It should be about what do we believe and what can actually bring us together that everybody can take home. So it's not just another guy's story. And they said, no, we want your story. This is very important. And I thought about it, and I said, why do we do this when we wake up in the morning? Now, Shawn, the world, people are scared more and more. Everybody's scared. I don't know if you noticed. And everybody's kind of hiding behind their screen, their phone. And I don't know if you see, but we are being served the same stuff that we look. I call it, where I grew up, people tend to marry their cousins. And people laugh at that when I say it, but I said, but you're doing the same thing with your brain, because you just got this algorithm that marry your ideas with their cousins. So what we did with our bloodlines, and I'm not saying it's a good thing, man. That's why I found that nice American lady. But frankly, I think we're doing this with our ideas and our brain. Why I'm telling you this is creates a whole generations, and I don't think it's a fatality, or people are scared. And when you're scared, your brain shuts down. It says, I went to see a neurologist to a few conferences called Christian Claude. I explained scientifically this process. And you'll see that's not a digression. That was my point. I said, I'm going to talk about this because I read this article that in the States now, 1% out of 8 of young people and older people say they have no more friends. 1 out of 8, Shawn. And people say they're getting out less. than drinking less. There was another study, it was a French study, I don't know, that said the younger people having less sex than any other younger generations. I don't know how they calculate that, by the way, but anyway, I took it for granted. And my point was really, do you guys want to live in a world? And I'm saying to anybody listening, do you want to live in a world where you don't really go out, you don't really have friends, you don't have much sex, you don't drink any good drinks? Do you want to live in that world, Shawn? I don't. I'll tell you that. And I think the bartenders have an incredible role to play more than ever. And that
Mm.
was the point actually of that neurologist that says, how do you get unscared? Communal pleasure, sharing pleasures with friends, going to a pub, going to a bar. This is really important. That's how you reset your brain. That's scientific, actually. If and what they see. So if you're scared, don't make a decision. Go to a bar, because your decision will be the wrong one. So make the decision before you go to a bar and have a drink. If you have no friends, it's okay. Go to a bar. Also, or go with friends somewhere and share a great drink. And so, to me, that's super important. And I say that, and that was what I was talking about. And to me, the future is that is I think we can together with bartenders, distillers, we can make this world better. And you're part of this, Shawn. One barrel, one bottle, one cocktail at a time. But for this, we have to be truthful about what we do. We got these products have to be impeccable, got to be delicious. People have to be able to afford it. They have to have meanings and essence, right? And the bartenders have to be, wonderful, not just technically, but that social aspect is key to me. So call me crazy, but I think that when you see that trend, I don't think it's a fatality. I know a lot of people, and you see the people who are young, you know, starting to say, wait a minute, I want to go out. I want to be my friends. And I think it will, maybe it's wishful thinking, but I like a world like this, that's open toward people. So this is how I see the future. So I know, Shawn, when a banker asks me, what's your 5-year plan? I never know the answer to this, but I know where we're going, and
Mm.
where we're going is making delicious libation, and I like to tell people, I'm building the instruments and you play the music, whether it is at your home with your friends or whether you're a bartender. You play that music. Again, scientifically, as you know, when you dilute down the spirit, when you're mixing, or if you use an ice cube, a little water for a single malt or beautiful aged rum or aged cognac, you perceive molecules of taste differently depending on their concentration. So you're actually making your own already, right? So we're giving you these tools. Recently, I decided, it took me 5 years to convince the team in Barbados, because it's not because I own the distillery that we're doing. I want everybody to be on board to release a product called Ogo Monster. And Hogo Monster, it's a supercharged high ester. Think of it of like a rum and steroid. The concentration of flavors and incredible. That's why you use long fermentations, and it's so concentrated. When you taste it, your taste buds go to a place that really they've never been. I promise you. There's only 4 or 5, like I said, countries who really have this knowledge nailed down for more than 100 years. And so I said, why don't we make this available for great bartenders or the super geeks, to say, I can have that. It's almost like a rumbitus, but it's
Mhm.
just a recipe that's over 100 years. Every master blender that likes to use this, we sell this to master blenders, but also, pastry chefs or perfume makers. And these are a tradition of very secretive rum making, but why not the consumer? And I only have a marketing department for 7 years. We only have, before I thought, what do you mean? We should spend that much? I'm like, that's 100 barrels, man. I'm buying the barrels. And then one day I met this wonderful lady who has this incredible passion for rum. And she convinced me, yes, it's great to do something, but there's a way to speak about it that makes more sense to people, and I can help you with this. And so anyway, I bought into it. And when I told her, but it's funny because most companies, when I speak, the other production guys like me, they're always like, man, marketing told me to do these products. These guys are crazy. I don't know what they're smoking. I hear this. In our company, it's the other way around. Angelique is this super structured lady with her team, and she's like, "We can't sell this. This nobody's gonna get it." And I told her, and And she's like, people are going to read a beautiful article about Plantaray, and they're going to see the smaller bottles. Say, oh, I can try it. And when they drink it, they're going to thinking like they just, they just something like another something landed in their mouth. And because this takes, it's like think about the whiskey from Isla, but on steroid, but
Mm.
with the rumminess, in that case. So we argued, and I said, okay, we're going to do it with a label that says, don't buy this unless you know what it is. And she's like, okay, that's why I do marketing, you do production. So we have this type of discussion. So she put on the neck, warning, extreme high esters. I think one day I'll win with the label that says, don't buy this unless you know what it is. And when you'll see it, you'll smile. I think I might win. But really, in the end, why do we do this? Is this going to make us, break the bank? No, but I'm so excited. Yesterday, I was with, at Wine Paris in Paris. I just took a train back to Cognac last night. And I was with wonderful bartenders. And when they drank it, I saw the sparkle in their eyes. They knew exactly what they're going to do with it. Again, I make the instrument, they play the music. And to me, that sparkle in their eyes is why I wake up in the morning, because I know they're going to make this big drink, they're beautiful drinks, and be on that mission to save this world one barrel, one bottle, one cocktail at a time. I think that's the circle that we're on, and the mission we're on. Whether we work a team in Barbados, as Jamaica, Cognac, that's the mission we're on. And as all the team who are there talking about it, most of them are the technical, training, working at Maison Ferrand. That's what we're on, and that's what we the way we're looking at the future. So I'm sorry to all the guys who look at it with a marketing plan, how we're going to do. But I know RTDs, we are being told, is the future, and there's some great ones. There's no problem with this. But to us, I think it's continuing to push these limits. And I would be really hard pressed that you wouldn't have people who want to surprise their taste buds and share this with other friends for a better moment. And that's why we wake up in the morning.
Do you think, like, because I know we obviously I prefaced everything at the start of the episode saying that we've known each other for a while now, and you've always been known as a rule breaker. And some of the stories you tell me about the rules you've broken, like you've already mentioned with Citadel and the gin, the rules you've broken just with cognac aging and finding archives, and when people and cognac is very strict in like this multi-generational verbal knowledge passing on. So sometimes it's just like, oh well, that's what the way my grandfather did it. I can't do it. I can't do anything else. Does the rule breaking for you, is that your sort of driver for like being an entrepreneur and sort of pushing the brands and creating new products?
I think it's I don't know. It's my mother is still she's a very old lady, a sculptor. I think it's pushing the limits, with creativity. I think it's wonderful, but creativity doesn't happen in a vacuum. You have to work very, very hard to learn, right? That's why I write books about the history of Grand Champagne and what is Grand Champagne technically, since the l'histoire de la Grande Champagne. That's why with Matt we wrote a book about what is Navy rum. Everybody's talking, yeah, okay, British Navy rum, but what is it? How is it made? And everything that I thought I knew was actually wrong. And that was 4 years of research in the archives, days in, days out for 6 months, with Matt being there, going out looking at archives since the 1600s. And some people think we're really crazy doing this because who is really interested? Well, I don't know. Some people are, by the way. But more importantly, also, and we're very flattered by that for sure, that we share the same passion. But it's such an inspiration. I created Mr. Fogg, an Evian based on this research. So for us, it's not about what is the rule going against the rule. We respect rules, when they're established, we sure do. But yes, we want them to reopen to historical practices. This is very true. Now, Cognac, there's a great environment, as you know. We speak, we talk, we fight. It's true, beyond, about these aspects. Yes, I'm dreaming for Cognac AOC to be reopened to all the type of woods that were used until 1983, which is yesterday: chestnut, mulberry, acacia barrels. And yes, I am doing it. But as you know, I don't want to go to jail for 5 months, and I'm respecting the law. So I'm calling it eau de vie de vin. And there was a funny story that the board summoned me on one of the issue. And again, very good people, because we're very straight with one another. And I do respect the fact that Cognac has such a patrimony with its history. but some beautiful elements are tucked in history that needs to be rediscovered and repracticed because they're beautiful flavor adventures. So when I made the one and I used rum barrels, and people used to use your rum barrels until 1983 to enhance certain exotic feel of cognac when it reaches 20 years old. I wrote on the back label, because this cognac, this product has been, aged in a rum barrel, it cannot be cognac anymore, but you have to put the ingredients, it's 100% cognac. And the team said, you can't do this back label. I said, the board. And I said, why? It's very clear. I literally say it's not cognac. And I said, yeah, but you use the word cognac 3 times to say it's not cognac. So and I'm like, all right, guys, hallelujah. I'll use it only one time. Why not? So, but it tells you how far it is. But, it's funny you say this. I'm working on something. And my wife, who was going through the archives of the Ferrand estate, it's literally cubic meters. She's been doing this for 4 years. And you need to see this. It's amazing. And there's a magazine. There's a newspaper. I don't know if you see it. It's called Le Vrai Cognac. It means the real cognac. Now, this is actually like a newspaper, and it's dated August 1912, so before First World War. And on a page there is an ad, and to say, for your cognacs you can buy wonderful chestnut barrels, right here. And
Wow.
and the newspaper is called The Real Cognac, right? So that's hard to match, right? And you got equipment, and this is really for cognac professionals, right? It is the organe de la Fédération des viticulteurs charentais. So this was the magazine of the vine grower of cognac. And so you have pumps, you have stills for sale. So this beautiful. I love these documents, because why do I spend time deciphering to decipher all these products? Because this is inspiring. So I think we're going to be able to do this. And that's the meeting I just had right before you was with somebody who's helping me doing this research, and we have a foundation to preserve this know-how. So for example, cognac still has the knowledge to make barrels from chestnut and all these barrels, but since they can't sell them locally, I make sure they have customers in Ireland with Irish whiskey, because it's wouldn't age over there, or balsamic vinegar. So the business is still there. So the craftsmen who do these barrels, they have a business line. So when we finally succeed, I hope to go back to our own heritage in cognac on that fact, we can actually have the makers there that have hundreds of years of knowledge, and we don't want this to be lost, because these again are tools for me as a distiller and as a cognac maker, and actually rum in that instance, where in rum you can, and you may know I even did a gin, the Old Tom, where I use acacia barrels. So this is something that for me, researching to create and as a leverage for creation to make delicious drinks, So yes, sometimes, you make a lot of friends in the process, and sometimes you make few enemies, man. And that's, some people, I mean, and I respect that. Like you can hate what we do, and it's okay, man. I'm not trying to, we're doing what we believe in, and if it's done in an honest way, and if it's, when I write my books, for example, about Navy rum, my introduction is very clear, or I say, look, if you think we did everything wrong there, let us know, and we'll make and give us the documentation. We'll make a better book next time. We'll just improve it. Same thing with techniques, and so for me, that's what it is. And yes, we're pushing the boundaries, and sometimes it can. I understand it can be looked at being a renegade, but this is not the purpose. The purpose is doing this mission we're on.
So, what's your plan for the next 6 months? Like we're in February now. Like, what's the plan for this year?
Well, first of all, on the summer note, you've seen Melissa hitting Jamaica. I have a meeting tonight at 9 p.m. here in France in 1 hour and a half with, as you know, I'm part of National Rum of Jamaica. So what do we do to fix this? To make sure that all the staff will have roofs, and that Lompon, who was hit by the storm with the column, how do we make sure we just again very, very soon. So that's going to be a big part, Shawn, about what we do for sure. We've also something very, very key, but we've studied for 7 years cane varieties in Barbados. Barbados has the incredible sugarcane breeding station that was established in the 1880s, We have planted canes that we chose for flavors of rum, not for flavors of sugar. So we're harvesting this, and we're going to be distilling it in the months to come, actually in the weeks to come. And I'm going to make a super high ester. I did one last year at 6,000 grams, so something that you need a chainsaw to drink. With cane juice, I did an introduction. Was the first time I've ever heard it being done. So that's also going to be something we're going to be working on. Also, we are going to be fixing one of the. This is breaking news, by the way. One of the old still that's at States Rum Distillery, the something called the Batson, that was built in the mid 1800s. So Gaylor and the team here are going to work on fixing them. So there's quite a few things, and the list is long because we work every day, on everything we do. But these are kind of the main subject. As you know, we've launched products we're so proud of in the past year. The Hogo Monster I told you about, very important. I'm usually always not happy with what we do until I am, and that takes years. It took me 4 years to finalize the cut and dry. I always wanted to do a Citadel with no alcohol. I failed miserably for 5 years, and we finally got it right, man. I was like, this is impossible because yeah, now at my age I can do. I'm not an old guy, but still I can do 2 cocktails that night if I'm working next day. I gotta slow down after that, right? So, but I want these 2 cocktails. But if I do 3, it's okay, and then 4, I'm paying next morning. So I'm not. But I want to continue drinking beautiful things. So a ginger beer with a little spoon of Hogo Monster, and yes, because it's so flavorful, it's gonna be beautiful. Or I did Citadel Zero. We finally have it out. And why not that? Why do we have to be like just drinking a sticky fruit juice or just sparkling water? If there's people who are very creative that can continue tease our taste buds, I felt that was also something we should look at quite a few years back, and we did. So that's already launched, in the Citadel. And as you know, I create every year 12 expression of single cask plantaray, where I revisit using barrels other than cognac and bourbon barrels. 99.9% of rum is aged in bourbon barrels. And what about rejuvenating these traditions where they were reusing every type of barrels? So I do 12 very limited expressions every year, and I never repeated them. I'm lucky to have a lot of friends who are great winemakers, so I can have a source of beautiful Pauillac and different wines, but also, the family-owned Choya Umeshu of dear friends. I got, Choya liqueur barrels, and I made a beautiful Fiji expressions. So I still continue to do these, and so this is something also I work on all the time every year. So it's a busy schedule.
It is a very busy schedule. I don't want to take up too much of your time, and I think I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours and hours all day long. But we're at the stage of the episode at the end of every episode, every guest gets 5 deep podcast questions. And I think you're going to like these. So what is one lesson or experience that has shaped your perspective the most, and how do you carry that forward in your life, whether that be personal or business?
Well, for me, I think I told you the story, is the one when my first distilling experience, to me, because my family was winemakers with the pot still. And I think 10 years old, you smell, you see, I thought there was a magic into distilling. And to me, that was kind of defining. I only afterwards. And so to me, it was like, this is magical how we can create flavors. And it's only later on I understood that distilling, it's grapes, but it's also other stuff. So to me, that was super defining. But I only knew this after the fact, and there's other experience, but I mentioned that earlier. To me, that's in retrospect, that was super, super defining. The rest that was defining, I think, was more things that went over and over again, things of cultivating lands, that relationship with land for me is so important, and it's always there. There's always something growing right next to where I live. Always. I cannot be away. It's funny because in Barbados, the distillery is right on the beach, and the team, my wife, I really loves that. And I like the beach a lot, but we have a farm inland, and I like to stay at the farm. There's the coconuts growing for cut and dry. We got all these beautiful canes. We're now planting ginger. So to me, that's the other things of that connection to the land that I grew up with, and that's kind of, in French we say Madeleine de Proust. The Proustian cake that always comes back to that mind. I think it always defines what I've been doing all these years.
If you'd had one lasting message or piece of wisdom for the world, what would it be and why?
Wisdom? I'm not sure I'm the guy to ask, man. I mean, just, I can tell you one thing. When people say, and quite a few people come to me and they said, I want to be distiller. And I'm like, all right, man, just something I'm going to tell you. If you're really passionate about it, you're just going to love the journey. But you're going to be cashless for the rest of your life. And that's my life, and that's how it works. So is it a piece of wisdom? I'm not sure. But I think you got to test into what you have. Is it something you're willing to do day in, day out in a very obsessive way? Because I think it's true in every creation act. I think it's true with a writer or artist, and I think it's something that's great. Now, are you born with passion? I don't think so. People, always say follow your passion, but I have kids, and people say, well, it happens. I have one that's a musician, and so she knows from early days. But some people are like, I don't know, it was my passion. That's all right too, because there's stuff you're good at, and you do them, and you do them more, and suddenly it grows on you, and that's okay too. Everybody has access to passion to a different way. Because I think sometimes it's very intimidating for people when you're being young people. I love young people, and I see them, and when they join me, remember the technical guys around me are my rock band. The guys who train me, I used to call them my ZZ Top guys because they were older and so on. The last one retired, Luc Sachet. I dedicated an aging warehouse. He comes every week, by the way. He try, and still now. And now I got these 4 ladies working with me. They're my new rock band. And so some people are there, and a lot of people tell them follow your passion. I think let your passion grow, and that's that. If it's a word of wisdom, sometimes you have it and so on. But if you're good at something and you like it, and try it again, and then it could grow on you as well. And I think it's true, because my kids are at that age, and I see it, and it makes me reflect. And I think that's kind of cool, and maybe another one is just not to follow the herd, and maybe some people need to, I don't know. But in my job, I'm always interested to these little gems that people have forgotten. For example, I love banyuls. I love Madeira, and I know everything should be about, now we're being told about premix and all of this. That's okay. But I think if you chase, Don Quixote, who was chasing the windmills, I think, chasing things that already exist. This is the trend. I'm going to give it a shot my way. I don't know. To me, the greatest people, and they seem to be happy at it, I hope so, are people who just it's their own thing, I mean, imagine Bob Dylan. Is he a great singer? Man, you heard his voice, Is he a great musician? I mean, he plays well the guitar, right? Yet his music is really interesting, right? He's a poet, and so he went into something that, if you really looked at it and says everybody is, you got to be that incredible voice with incredible range. He still did pretty okay, right? And I think he did it his way. So I think it's really doing it your way, and it's okay if you don't know at the beginning. It grows. So I know, because when the younger guys came to join me, I love people who are very like, this lady came, she's by my side, Fanny, and her dream when she was 12 years old, and her passion was to be a perfume maker. French woman, so perfumes. I'm going to be a perfume maker. She's a master in perfume making, and it didn't grow on her. She felt, man, I thought perfume was distilling, was all these magical things. We're just blending flavors. Then she did a PhD in distilling. and we created. She joined when I saw her PhD thesis was distilling on unfiltered wines, heavy lees, and that's our specialty at Maison Ferrand. And when I saw her work, I said, "You want to join it? We have a rock band. We're making spirits." And she said, "I know you," and and she joined in, and we created a gin together, Jardin d'été, and you know, when we were about to go on stage to introduce it in Paris, and as a master distiller, I was supposed to talk about it. And I said, "Fanny, I'd like you to go and tell everyone." She's, like, I can't do this, man. I'm just and she told me, I always want to create my perfume since I'm 12 years old, and then I grew out of it. But I realized we made a perfume together, and it's Citadelle Jardin d'été. And so you see how it can go full circles, and grow on you. So I don't know if it makes sense, but like I said, wisdom, I'm not sure of the man, but I can just share, the way it kind of happens around here at Maison Ferrand.
Looking back on your journey, what is something you wish you had understood earlier in life?
Yeah. Sometimes that a relationship or something is toxic and you postpone it, and you shouldn't, because you're scared probably. And my grandfather always said, because I'm somebody who loves to put people together on a mission. This is something I really love, like community and creating as a community. And he always said, you always think you can transform everyone to their best and stuff. There's 1% of the population that you can't do this, because it's you or because it's them. And you have to identify it and know how to get it aside. And this took me 30 years to figure out. Sometimes there's something that's because of the chemistry, something is going to be not good or toxic for you. You have to learn to say, you know what, maybe not. So it's a little thing. I don't think it's a massive thing for my life, but I think it now that I do this, and maybe to say, look, man, maybe not, and I think it's much better.
How do you define success, and has your definition of it changed over time?
And definition of what? I'm sorry?
Success.
Well, I don't know. For me, I don't know. I mean, if you're not happy, there's no success, right? I think so. And also, if you don't make people happy around you, you know what I mean? I don't think it's a lonely journey. I love to see people growing around me. So to me, I can tell you the two reasons I wake up in the morning. And to me, if I do this well, this is success. It's a community, having a team that grows with you. This is so satisfying to see that somebody, is done something that maybe they didn't know they could do, and to me, that's that I draw a lot of pleasure from this, to just push the limit. And I'm not easy to work with, because I'm always, saying, no, we can do this better, and we do this better. Luckily, people stay. Guillaume runs the US, he's a superstar. He's been 27 years. When I started, Shawn, there was 6 people with me. 3 of them 37 years ago. 3 of them are still here.
That's
now
awesome.
They're threatening to retire. So, Beatrice, Annabelle, and Sandra. And so to me, that's the first thing, that's what I love. And that's why basically I live where I work. And because I'm with the team, my kitchen is downstairs, everybody's kitchen. So to me, I'm happy with this. So to me, do I want to do something else? I like that. And I need this, and the second thing is creation. I love to create. I love to build, and I'm very handy. I can, if I'm on vacation, if I don't have a wall to build or a roof to fix, it's so that's different from what I do every day. Then my wife wants to divorce me. She's like, you're unbearable. But if I have like something to build, something to draw, something to, I do the drawings of our stills, then I'm happy. So to me, is that success? I don't know, but at least that's what made me tick, and if I can do this for the many years to come, yeah, I'm happy. And is that success? I guess it is. If you define success, as I think feeling all right, about what you're doing, and that's to me that's important. And by the way, that's why I always love communities. Bartender communities is wonderful because it's a community and it's doing stuff together. So when you we make a promise to the team when they join Maison Ferrand. It's a long process. We need to know each other's and stuff. I have a distiller from India that's probably going to join. We lived a week together, and so he thought it was a bit strange. But and once we say we're going to work together, I said, the Ferrand promise is you're never going to be bored for the rest of your life if you stay here with us until then. And I think I'm very happy that we deliver on this most of the time for the team and for the community that Maison Ferrand is about. To me, that's important.
Last one. What do you hope your legacy will be, and what steps are you taking to build it?
I don't. I'm not thinking of my legacy at all. Honestly, to me, it's like I told you. You don't own a distillery, you tend a distillery. You don't own a farm, you tend a farm. What I want to do is make it a little bit better. So I don't need people to say this guy did this guy did that, and so on and so forth. If it's meaningful, I can give you a very strong example. We have our own artisans team that cuts stone, builds, we have our own building teams, and also coppersmith and also cooper. We have two coppersmith and one cooper for barrels. And when we fix a wall, I always say, we use with local stone. I want us to make it in a way that in 200 years, when they fix it and they look at it, they probably have no clue who we were, but they're going to say, whoa, these guys knew their stuff. And to me, if that's what can happen, that's enough. That's wonderful. And we do that a lot, when you look at, or you say, man, these guys were really rough. And, in Cognac, there's a tradition in our area here. When you finish a wall, you hide a bottle in the wall with a little time capsule note, and we always do that. And so it's not about you, but it's always like what you left. But even if that time capsule is not there, to me, that's beautiful. When you look at somebody's doing this, you don't have their name, but you're like, man, these guys really poured their heart into it. And that's, if we can do this, about the spirits we create, and yes, we do all the buildings here and stuff. Yeah, I think that's good. And that's what I think that's all I need.
Thank you so much for your time, Al. It's been Alexandre. It's been fantastic. I always love catching up with you, and we've crossed paths, tales, and everything else. And that cab ride, I still, whenever I do cocktail training and cognac, whenever I do cognac training, I still talk about that experience being one of the most prolific cognac experiences for me. And I think cognac is such an underdog spirit still to this day that people don't really get it. And I try my very best to make people get cognac. But I just want to say thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Shawn. It's a great pleasure. Great to see you come back. There's a lot of things that we want you to try. And, it's also it's your home for you now. You're a cognac educator. So you take care, man. Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone, by the way. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. I'll see you soon.